Here we go. We're live. So remember, I can hear your thoughts. So think nice things. So the first thing on the agenda is talking about some 4.2 resources. Because remember, 4.2 is due by midnight tonight. So you want to use this class time effectively and make sure that you are dialed in while I'm talking. And then you have lots of time to talk after I'm finished. But we're going to start today by going over a couple schemes on how to read the color wheel that we made with the polar grid the other day. So I used your example in first period, actually. So we're going to pull up. Did we use the polar grid to break it into the pieces yet? I think we did that, right? Okay, sweet. So we have I'm going to get rid of this one. We have this color wheel right here that I want you to focus on specifically. I'm going to pull it over into the gray space, so it's all we can focus on, right? And then in this class, I also use the pizza terms, right? With crust, toppings, and point to talk about each different parts of the wheel. Perfect. Okay, cool. You guys are caught up with first period. So there's a specific way that colors are set up on this wheel, and that's on purpose. The first purpose of that being is understanding how to actually find a color's complement or find a color's family in a tetradic scheme. All those words don't make sense quite yet because all of the information we have to work with is right here. However, the reason I had us build this pizza crust style color wheel, who goes there? Hi, welcome in. We're in the Zoom room. We just started, so you haven't missed it. Okay. The reason I had you do this pizza crust style color wheel is because there's a specific relationship that happens with direct opposites, as well as some other sort of breakdowns, very similarly to this wheel right here. But we see this one a little bit more commonly, so we're gonna kind of analyze this a bit more. The first scheme, and there's a reference document that you can check out later, so you don't have to memorize all of these right now, but the first scheme is called a complementary color scheme. I'm sure you've heard that term before, but this is how it works on the color wheel. It's going to go directly across from one color to the next, and it's going to be its direct opposite. For example, this shade of red, its complementary scheme is this kind of shade of army green. If we did the blend, Mr. Hendrix's videos, he samples from the swatches panel, like this guy. But with mine, we blended our primaries and secondaries together to make this green. And these two are complements of one another. Complementary colors are great for very contrast-heavy schemes. Contrast is going to be the placing two things of very different styles next to one another, right? So that it draws your attention towards it. But any scheme that you look at, if I take my direct select tool here real quick, I can move these individual anchor points. Any scheme that you look at, if you look directly across the color wheel, you're going to find its complement. So orange and blue, for example, is a very popular complement to use in film video editing. It's a very Hollywood style color combo to use. Or if we look right here, that's not straight across. This is straight across. We have husky colors, purple and gold. What else do we have? We have the traditional Christmas colors of red and green. We have, those are the big ones, orange and this kind of gray. Those are the biggest complements because you can tell they're straight across from one another in a complementary scheme like this. You do not need to break down each one of these schemes. These are mostly just kind of vocab and for reference. You don't need to turn in 5-something color wheels, but this is how a complementary color scheme is going to work across the color wheel. And the reason I'm giving you these names, though, is I mentioned at the start of the unit, you have to use color intentionally now. You have to pick a scheme that is some type of scientifically proven. You don't have to understand every point as to why, but you need to stick to a scheme so that you're using color effectively. And complementary is one of the easiest ways to start because you only have 2 colors to worry about, and it's really, really easy to quickly tell which is which. Another type of color scheme that we actually have already created, but I'm going to give a name to, is something called a triadic color scheme. If you can guess the word triangle, it's going to be similar on this wheel right here. So I'm going to drag a quick copy off, and I'm going to make my triangle. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Do this, do this. All right. I'm going to grab a quick triangle with the polygon tool, if it would. There we go. Polygon tool, set that down to 3 with my mouse wheel. If I put my first point of the triangle, as long as it's equilateral, because we're working with perfect circles and stuff like that, and I do a little bit of adjusting here. Oh, bear with me. get this so that it touches three specific colors. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So there's your triadic color scheme. That's your primaries, your secondaries, but not the tertiaries, because tertiaries are mixes along the way. They're kind of halfway points. But a triadic color scheme moves in a triangle. And you can do this same thing on your Illustrator as well with your pizza crust color wheels, is lay a triangle over it. It's not going to line up perfectly, but look, there's my secondary colors. There's some desaturated secondary colors, right? Let's go blue. Oh, blue, red, and yellow. We already did. There's green, orange, and see, I'm already catching just a couple of the reoccurring color schemes already, but I'm going to leave it on this one right here. These are your triadic color schemes because they are a triangle. Triadic. Similarly to sticking with these shapes. Oh, that's gross. There we go. Sticking with the geometric shapes, there's also a color scheme called a square color scheme or a tetradic color scheme. So let me pull, I just want to pull this guy off to the side. Square color scheme works exactly the same way that the triadic color scheme does, except it's got 4 instead of just 3. So let's turn my stroke weight up on this. And it creates either a rhombus or like a compass rose on your color scheme. And that's going to be, let me just resize this a little bit here so you can have that visual. I'll make another copy that's a little bit easier to understand too. But this is your tetradic color scheme with the red, purple, the army green, and the kind of dandelion yellow. That's something else that as you study and if you're interested in graphic design more thoroughly, you're going to start to see more advanced color names all throughout the world, different types of fonts when we get to typography all throughout the world. It's a fun little kind of peek into how the world is created. But anyway, sorry, back to focus. These are your tetradic color schemes, or also known as square color schemes for obvious reasons. And the other way that you might see this tetradic or square color relationship is like if you took a complementary scheme and added a second, let me move this over a little bit more, added a second perpendicular, let's try to get it as perpendicular as possible, second perpendicular set of complements. Okay, so these two things right here are the same, just with two different visualizations, tetradic or square. Whichever one makes more sense to you is the one that you should go with, right? So I'll group these two close to one another so that they have a similar sort of effect. Okay, so there's 5 different color schemes already. There are 2 more that I want to show you. There's split complementary, which is almost exactly the same as complementary, except for the fact that instead of going directly across, it creates sort of like a Cupid's arrow, like a bow and arrow type thing. So it takes let me grab this one anchor point. There we go. Goes to the middle off of the kind of set scheme. Let's stick with the red hue right here. Move this out of the way. And then instead of going straight across to the green, it grabs the 2 neighbors directly next to, let me get these a stroke real quick and turn it up. See how that Cupid's arrow is kind of starting to happen? It's a complementary scheme, but instead of going straight across, it takes the direct 2 neighbors right next to it. That's not the tool that I want. And this is a split complementary. If you're in any of the art classes, they'll go into more detail about color and color science as well. But for our purposes, we just need to understand how to use the tools so that we can reference them later on. And then the final color scheme, the final section of your vocab portion of the day is an analogous color scheme. So a lot of these have really scientific names, but since they have those scientific names, you can kind of base or kind of get a basic grasp of how they're going to relate if you had to guess. So an analogous color scheme, if you think about an analogy in language or just in general, it usually means some type of the same thing, whether that's a comparison using something similar or another option I can't think of at the moment because I'm not an English major, but an analogy is another way to say some type of the same thing. And the same is true for color, because analogous color schemes are going to be your 3 sets of neighbors like this right here. This is not monochromatic. Monochromatic is just one color, mixing white and black, tinting or shading it. But an analogous color scheme, like this one, is going to be the 3 neighbors. So these 3 greens, these 3 oranges, these three purples with the blues, all those are going to be your analogous color schemes. But that's all just so you guys have some vocab of the different types of schemes that you encounter most frequently in graphic design. I will tell you 99% of the time I'm doing personal design work, or mostly personal. I haven't done professional in some time. I'm using a complementary scheme. It's the easiest. It quickly creates contrast. You can still use solid black. You can still use solid white. It gives you a range of nice looking colors. It has a ton of benefits and very few drawbacks. Not to say that these other ones have drawbacks, but they are a little bit harder to get right or a little bit harder to look nice. Complementary is the easiest. It's the one that I recommend that you stick to for this next part of the assignment, which is actually generating your scheme. So if I open up the example from, this is first period, we're going to work towards something like this. This is a complementary color scheme, and we've created that final portion of this assignment, which is this pattern quilted sort of situation that we got going on here. But we have to get our scheme established. I highly recommend you pick complementary, but I will show you the ways to use the other ones. We're going to blend for probably the last time. You're probably really sick of blending at this point, but to pick your scheme, I'm going to go with complementary, for example. You take your two hues that relate to how they are on the wheel. So for example, if we do red and green, I'm going to alt drag a red and a green off of there. And then I'm going to blend these two colors together. So highlight, object, blend, make, and then object, blend, blend options again, blend, blend options. And set the specified steps. This is one where you want a higher number. So I'm thinking like 5 to 7 to 9 is the range of space that I want you looking for in this range. So I'm going to do 7, and that's going to give me this range of different hues that I can use inside of my design work that is still within a complementary scheme. The same sort of ideas apply as if you were doing traditional art, where you use the lighter colors for the bright parts and the darker colors for the dark parts, obviously. But for our purposes, this gets you a complementary scheme that you can work with, that you can sample freely from this last part that I'm about to show you. So if we look back at our agenda, we got the schemes. I'll show you where the reference document is. And then at this point, you'll want to choose your scheme. This is how you create the complementary version, which I'll give a little text here. Complementary. All right. And then if you want to do a scheme with multiple different hues in it, I'll just put these right next to one another so you can see a little bit more easily. Like triadic, for example, you would need to pull, let me ungroup that, sorry. Ungroup. You would need to just pull all 3 of the hues that come out of your color scheme off the pizza crust and blend those together instead. So we're going to blend options. You could turn this number down a little bit, maybe more like 5 or 3, because then you'll get this sort of interesting outline. Actually, there's probably a better way to do this. Hold on. Let me try something. So you want to pull the first color, put it on the top, second color, put it in the middle, and third color on the bottom, like this, because I did red, yellow, blue. And then when we highlight those 3 and blend them together, it'll be a lot easier to see in theory if I did this right. Let's see. Just go 3. Nope, it's still making a mess. Okay, so this is why complementary is easier as well, because then you don't have to figure out what's going on with your shapes. If you look, hover over and you see this path, you can take your direct select tool and grab one of those anchor points and just pull it to the side so that you have an actual range of hues in here that you can use if you wanted to do something like a tetradic color scheme or the other. But if you do a complementary scheme, you don't have to do any of that adjustments, which is why I'm going to stick with complementary as the example here. Okay, so you do not have to make another color wheel that says complementary, but you do, however, have to make a blend of the colors that you're going to be using for this last little portion of this assignment. And then once I finish this, you will have plenty of time to work on it and plenty of time to have me help you with it. So the last part of this assignment, because we built the pizza crust wheel, we built the primary, secondary, and tertiary wheel, and it's optional, but you can do tints and shades if you'd like. You do not have to do these portions of the pizza. You just need these 2, the crust and the primary, secondary one. But from your scheme here, to make this version, to make this sort of shape right here, you're making kind of like quilt squares or tiles, and you're gonna mix them together in different ways, only sampling off of this color relationship right here. So I always start with a square by holding shift and dragging that out. And then I take my eyedropper tool. Actually, before I do that, let me make a geometric, let me make some type of geometric shape. So I'm just gonna set this to black fill. Well, okay, white fill. So you can see what I'm doing here. But I'm starting with a square, and then here's where I wanna see what I wanna do. Do I wanna go geometric, where I add just some shapes on top of that, mostly randomly, maybe with a little bit of intention? You can mix this up. So let's make this kind of a gray so we can see it. Okay, let's just throw a polygon in there, or a triangle. These are, I'm only changing the fill color so you can see the example, right? You're just kind of combining these geometric shapes in ways that could be interesting. Say I want to copy this, maybe do something in the other direction, right? Make those two overlap, kind of get an hourglass sort of situation, right? I'm just messing around. I'm just seeing what kind of happens when I mess with organic or geometric shapes in this way. So I kind of like where this is going. It could be like an owl's face or like an hourglass, or I don't know, however you want to interpret it is the fun part of art and design. And then I can sample different parts of my color scheme by just clicking on the separate shapes and then using my eyedropper tool to just kind of, oh, maybe don't want it to blend into the background too much, so that I can get a tile for my design. Let's do this one. Let's do a little bit more orange. A little bit more like that. Okay. So this is not the prettiest example, but it is what we will be doing with the with colors in this instance. And so I've got my tile that has some geometric shapes on it. Copy that off to the side like this. And then I can either switch up the colors that I used. Maybe go for a green background and red accents this time. Or a greener background and some redder accents this time. Just kind of inverting the colors. That's a little too close to the actual background. Let's go a little bit redder. Just hitting I on my keyboard and V to get my selection tool. And it's the same design, but because the color relationship has switched it up a little bit, while also maintaining this complementary scheme, we can create some interesting sort of patterns and tiles that you can explore, different contrasts, different color combos, different arrangements like this. So let's say I have my row of geometric shapes. Now I want to build a quick organic shape, something that's a little bit flowier. So I can take my brush tool and I'm going to very quickly and very poorly, let me turn off fill so that it's not, oh, that's not what I wanted. Okay, take my brush tool. Okay, it's painting. Say I wanted something a little bit more contoured, maybe some waves, maybe a leaf, right? I don't know, but I'm messing around. And these are not polygons now, but let's just add a couple more waves so we can have some different things that we can change the color of. Right? Because we're focusing on color and the relationship of color, not necessarily how your tiles look exactly. All right, so then I can bring my scheme back down here and close this so you can actually see what I'm doing. And now I can start sampling different parts of this color scheme to change the different aspects. Oh, okay. That's okay if it does that. We're just gonna call it there. Okay, get a couple green ranges in there. Maybe this has some redness to it. And then we'll put some kind of brown like that. So I did a much simpler example in first period. So we'll go back to that here in a second. So you can see the thought process in two different ways. But by combining these tiles, these squares together, except mine are not the same size apparently. It's fun. So let me fix that real quick. There we go. Close enough. Okay. And so now I can switch up these colors, right? I can just, since I know this scheme of colors is going to work well together, even though my example is Pretty drab. It's not very saturated. It's not the most appealing thing, but remember, I'm also thinking and talking at the same time of doing this. You guys will be focused and have a better eye. So sample this real quick for example's sake. Make sure those greens are different. And then we'll do one of the browns. I don't know. Something like that. And that gives us this really interesting tiling effect that all maintains the same color relationship that we chose earlier. Like you can see on this one, I was just sampling different parts, just experimenting with how different colors are going to work with one another from this complementary scheme that I generated here. And it turned out into this really nice kind of husky colored quilt or pattern or texture, whatever name you would like to call it. This is the last part of the assignment that you need. So you do not have to try organic designs. I would think it would be cool. You do not have to, sorry, let me rephrase that. You do not have to only use organic shapes. You do not have to only use geometric shapes. You should try for a mix of two. It's okay if you only go geo or only go organic, but try mixing them up, see what you can discover, and only stick to this color scheme right here. All right, so I will wrap this up real fast. Let's get rid of all these. The only things that you need to submit for the actual turning in portion of this assignment, your artboard should look something like this. It should have the two color wheels that we created. The tints and shades are optional, but you need your pizza crust version and you need your primary secondary version. Then you need the scheme that you decided on for you. Oops, I didn't want to copy actually. Then you need a scheme that you decided on for the tile or the pattern portion. You must label your scheme so I know which one you're going with. Complementary. Okay, complementary. And then finally, you need your pattern design, your quilt design, however name you want to call it. I keep forgetting this one portion. Okay, let me move this over. Resize it a little bit so that it fits on my artboard. Just gonna take all these and move them over for now. Be gone, be rid. Okay, your artboard, when you turn it in, should look something like this. It's not gonna be exactly the same. It's gonna be much better than mine. I went with a rather drab set of colors. But if you think you're ready to turn in, you wanna check and make sure that it looks like this before you export that and submit it to Canvas. So, with the remainder of our period, you guys need to get your artboards looking like this. You have Zoom rooms that show you how to build the other two color wheels. And then you have today's stuff talking about the tiling and the schemes. Remember, this is due by midnight for full credit. And I'll be wandering around after we process this. So I see a question in the back. Is it for me specifically, or do you, bless you, of the class? Okay, I'll be right over. Cool. Any other questions? Anything, anybody curious on what I'm looking for? All right, sweet. Your artboard should look like this before you submit it. If it does not, let me know and we'll get there. Okay, sweet. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it very much. Let me process this and then I'll start wandering.